I opened the door for Gerard, and he sat down breathless and exhausted in the back seat. He was clammy and pale as he sat down on the white leather. All this running around wasn't good for him. "You never could tell your right from your left," Marissa said as I sat down beside her. Ignoring her, I pulled out the pink slip of paper that she had given me last night with the address scrawled in the inevitable pink ink. "Are you sure this is the right address?" Marissa calmly took the paper from my hands. "That's the address he gave me. But you've never actually been there." "Why should I? There aren't even any shops where he lives." She pressed a button and the car answered her in a demure but impersonal voice. "Destination, please." Reading from the note, she replied, 8595 Palm Grove. The car revved to life and pulled away from the curb. As we started north towards the bay, Marissa searched through her purse. Finding her phone, which was pink, she touched the screen to call. It rang several times before she placed the phone back into her purse. "He's still not picking up." I grabbed her sleeve. "What if he's not home?" Marissa put her hand on mine and pried my fingers from the delicate fabric of her blouse. "Lisbeth, it's going to be all right. Even if everything looks bad now, things always work out." I didn't argue with her. What would be the use? Marissa had grown up less than 1 mile from my house in a home very different from my own. For starters, where Marissa lived, the roof didn't leak, like the cracks in the walls were patched and painted, and all the furniture was replaced every 10 years. If that was all, I couldn't complain against her, but she still had both her parents living, each in robust health, and in her entire house there was not one extended family member dwelling with them, not even a cousin twice removed. Still, Marissa was my best friend, even if she did live in an alternate reality from me. But the part she least understood was the part about lacking money. Her family was famous for never going into debt. My family was the opposite. We owed money to everyone. "So," she asked, "is Dr. Caswell going to give you a break?" "Yeah," I said. "We worked something out." "Good," she grinned. It was amazing how, after all these years, Marissa still couldn't tell when I was lying to her. I could tell her anything and she'd believe it. Like the time when we were 9 and I had told her that rats were actually very small dogs that had originally been bred to be lap dogs for very small women. She believed me without blinking an eye. When she had told her father, he laughed till he cried. I looked out the window. Ottleton was a colorful, sun-drenched city filled with clean, beautiful buildings and clean, beautiful people. The weather was balmy and felt like rose petals on your skin. In Ottleton, there was always something to do, somewhere to go, someone to see. And with one king gone and another on his way in, the atmosphere was bursting with anticipation for the inevitable coronation parties. But as exciting as Ottleton could be, I wasn't going to cry when I left it behind this afternoon. After all, with all its charms, it was also loud, ridiculously enormous, and crowded beyond the point of reason. When I first came to this city to live 3 years ago, the whole place had made my head spin. Certainly I had visited Ottleton with my family as a child, but it is one thing to visit a place under the protective wing of a father, and it is quite a different thing to move here, young and alone, with no one to watch over you but your best friend, who was even more naive than yourself. Marissa and I lived with Mrs. Haverden, a proper old widow who took in young ladies as boarders. And while Mrs. Haverden was an extremely affectionate woman, she had a curious lack of patience with late rent payments. That being said, one could say my relationship with my landlady had been somewhat strained lately. Outside the boarding house, things were always more pleasant. Marissa's father, Sir John Robert, had several contacts and friends in high places. We were welcomed with open arms and shown all the luxuries Ottleton had to offer. Oh, we were a big hit, Marissa and I, 2 doe-eyed teenage girls from the land beyond the yellow zone. Everyone had fawned over us like new kittens. We were a novelty and they all wanted their turn with us. So lonely I was not, but homesick, always. It took us 20 minutes before we reached the apartment building on Palm Grove. Despite its pleasant name, Palm Grove wasn't the most fashionable place to live. Neither did it have any palms. It was right on top of the shipping yards, miles away from a good beach, and the only view it afforded was one of the port where the cargo ships brought in their ugly piles of steel containers. In other words, it was perfect for people who liked nothing better than to be left alone. The car neatly parked itself in a free space across the street from the gray brick apartments. Gerard had been asleep, but as the car came to a stop, his head snapped up from his chest. White flecks had formed at the side of his mouth, and he glanced sleepy in confusion. "There already?" "Why don't you stay here and wait for us?" I told him. "There's no need for you to come." He nodded, blinking. "Thank you, miss." Marissa and I exited the car and walked toward the building. "Gerard doesn't look very good," she said as we dodged a delivery truck. "Maybe he should see a doctor." I tried that, but like I said last night, he only wants to get home to explain things to Uncle William himself. Of course he'll never make it home before Clay's, and neither will I if Timothy won't help me. Then why try? Come on, Lisbette, say you'll stay. There's nothing you can do at home to fix this mess. And besides, when will you ever get the chance to see a coronation again? Think of the parties you'll miss. I'll even let you wear my white dress. I don't care a thing about coronations right now, I replied, and I am going to fix this mess or die trying. Marissa didn't say anything more, but I knew from her huffy silence that she was angry. We reached the doors of the building, each equally annoyed with the other. I paused for only a moment in the lobby to scan the area for the door-marked stairs. As soon as I found it, I was on the move again, asking over my shoulder, "What apartment?" "I'm not telling," she said, hooking my arm and steering me toward the elevator. "We're taking the elevator, and that's final." I dug my heels into the carpet. "What apartment?" Marissa never could stand up to me. 604, but there's no way I'm going to climb all the way to the 6th floor. It was my turn to grab her arm. "Are you kidding? We can burn 50 calories by taking the stairs alone. Come on, I tell you, I saw you take that extra roll at lunch yesterday." She made a face and groaned pitifully. "Why are you so mean?" We took the stairs. Marissa grumbled the entire way, begging me to slow down, but that was out of the question. Clay's was already on his way back home by now, and there wasn't a second to be lost. When we got to the 6th floor, I left Marissa and jogged all the way to door number 604. I pressed the doorbell and waited. There was no answer. Marissa caught up and leaned against the wall, holding her side. This time I knocked on the door. Then I knocked harder. "Marissa," I whimpered, "he's not answering." She was still breathing hard through her mouth. "He's probably," she took a breath, "still asleep." She took another few breaths and added, "I saw him last night at the party. He was still there when I left." I had missed last night's party, and I was still sore about it. We'd only recently discovered Audleton's latest trend, Sabitos. These were spontaneous parties in completely random and sometimes illegal spots. It was almost impossible to get an invitation unless you knew the right people. This one had been held in the parking garage of the National Treasury Gallery, just across the street from the palace, despite the fact that the place was still draped in black flags. But the theme had been a coronation one, which made it morally legit as far as the crowd was concerned. I happen to know the right people, or at least some of them, so I rarely miss out on a Sabito. But where was I last night? Instead of spending the night dancing and mingling at the most vogue spot in town, I spent the evening at the police department with Gerard, filling out forms and answering questions. I had never been in a police department before, and needless to say, I hope never to have to return to one. I had no idea there could be so many people working in one place who could be so completely indifferent to the fact that I had just lost 40,000 banknotes in back taxes. I even tried to explain, while holding back tears, that if we didn't get this money back, our home, our land, everything would be taken away from us. But today the crying was over. Now it was time to fix the problem, if the problem could be fixed. And if it was going to be fixed, I needed to get home before Clay's. I pounded on the door. "Here," Marissa said, pushing in front of me and opening her purse. "He gave me the spare key." I looked at the key as if it was the answer to all my prayers. "Why didn't you bring that out before?" She slipped the key into the bolt and unlocked the door. There was a long entryway in which we stood motionless for several seconds. I suddenly felt hesitant. What we were doing felt too much like breaking and entering. "Are you sure this is the right place?" I whispered. "Well, not exactly," she whispered back. "What do you mean, not exactly?" "I've never been here before, and look at this place," she said, motioning at the living area down the hall. "My brother's a neat freak, and this place is a mess." She was right. There were clothes and boxes scattered all over the furniture and floor, chairs askew, and papers covering the table in disarray.